Hi, everyone. My name is Lavinia Plonka, and I'm so happy to greet you for our panel discussion of our theme of emotional intelligence, which is a huge subject. And I had the pleasure of interviewing three people, Jeff Haller, Alan Questel, and Odette Guimond, who gave us three really powerful perspectives on how the Feldenkrais method and emotions work together. If you haven't had a chance to see those videos, don't worry. They will be available for 48 hours after today. And so what we're going to be bringing in today are two panelists, two experts in the Feldenkrais method, who have also done a lot of work in the realm of the emotions in different ways. And we're going to kind of put this all together into what we hope is a lively conversation. And during the conversation, I'd like to invite you, you can all look down and see that at the bottom of your screen, you have a little thing called Q&A. And if you have a question for the panelists, you can type your question in there. And in the later half of the discussion, we'll be taking these questions, answering them for you in different ways, depending on what the question is. If you have any technical issues, that's when you want to use the chat function. So if you use the chat function, we will not see your questions. And if you want to chat and put it in the questions, then the technical people won't see your chat. So make sure that you pick the right one. So enough of that. Now, what I'd really like to do is introduce the two panelists, and they have such amazing credits that I'm actually going to read it because it's really a lot of great information. Tiffany Sankari is an artist who integrates the Feldenkrais method, organic intelligence, authentic movement, and the creative process. She's an assistant trainer in the Feldenkrais method and is currently teaching in the Boston training. She created movementandcreativity.com, which is a comprehensive online resource that supports physical, emotional, and creative well-being. Her movement and creative movement library has hundreds of Feldenkrais lessons to do at home, curated from somatic teachers around the world. And it's an incredible resource, I have to say. She's the illustrator and editor of Feldenkrais Illustrated, The Art of Learning, a visual guide to the philosophy and writings of Moshe Feldenkrais. And if you like really clever and beautiful illustrations that talk about his wisdom, I mean, I just love this book. It was how I first discovered Tiffany, was actually seeing her illustrations. And Tiffany lives in Boston, Massachusetts with her husband, Marty Wilkinson, who is also a Feldenkrais practitioner, and their two children. I don't know how she finds the time to do all of this. And Michael Landau currently lives in Chile, all the way down in South America. We were just joking, actually, that sometimes the sound takes a little bit longer to catch up with his face as we're talking. So just be aware of that, that he's talking from very, very far away. And he's a Feldenkrais practitioner since 1994. And he's also a professional musician. He taught musical repertoire and interpretation as a piano accompanist at the Vienna Conservatory in Austria and in the Catholic University of Valparaiso in Chile. A couple of years ago, he decided to quit professional musicianship and dedicate himself to teaching Feldenkrais and developing growth and transformational workshops. His winding path of spiritual growth led him to the shamanic training of the medicine wheel and the art of energetic healing, which again is so related to the emotions. And I'm sure that Michael will be talking about that, to a long path of study and meditation of Tibetan Buddhism, and a whole lot more. So without further ado, I would like to invite both of you to join me, and welcome to Emotional Intelligence, Move Better, Feel Better. So unmute yourselves, great. And so of course, the first question that everybody asks, first of all, I think about this whole movement towards emotional intelligence. There's books that are called Emotional Intelligence that help us access emotional intelligence. What does emotional intelligence have to do with the Feldenkrais method? Maybe Tiffany, you want to start?
And I was reflecting on this full circle of speaking on this panel on emotional intelligence and how I came to the Feldenkrais method, which was I heard about it from my mom. I had one functional integration lesson, which is the hands-on work. And at the time I was looking for looking for a way to have a more loving relationship with my body. And I had been looking through like psychology and kind of more like mental talking process to deal with like body image and growing up overweight as a kid and la 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 la. And I just had I was like a head, eyes, hands person. And then after that one lesson, I walked out of the lesson and I felt beautiful, which was
Mm.
very surprising to me to feel that quality after this very subtle process. And I had no idea why. And so that was the beginning for me. And that's like touching into this whole thing of like, what is that? That from that lesson, I had that feeling that I had not felt. So that led me on the journey, and that's kind of why I'm here now.
So when you said you felt beautiful, is that an emotional quality? How do you
It
define
felt
feeling beautiful?
that's a good question. I mean, it's interesting because it connects to me. Feldenkrais talks a lot about aesthetic satisfaction and moving in a way that feels pleasurable to you or feels good to you or that's aesthetically satisfying, which was talked about in the interviews too. And I think that I just felt good, I felt good in myself, and that shifted my image of myself somehow. And then I walked a little, I didn't know even what the physical changes were right away. And then after walking a few blocks, it felt like my hip joints had been oiled, and I started to notice that I was walking differently. But even before that, it was an emotional shift that I had.
It was
Yeah.
an emotional shift in terms of your attitude towards yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my self-image is very much connected with the emotions as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you want to add anything to that, Michael?
I can give you my version of the answer. First,
Well, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the answers. We know that's not true, but I'd like to hear what you have to say.
the short version is the Feldenkrais method has to do with people. People have emotions. Emotions are part of what we are working with. We're trying to become more intelligent with our movement, with our emotions, with our lives, and live better. So emotions are there and they're present. Then there is the longer version of the answer
Okay.
that the Feldenkrais method is disguised as body work. I think we are known as body workers. People come to us when something hurts, often. I mean, it is not really clear to the world, and sometimes not clear to us practitioners, that we are in the transformational business. I was thinking recently about the title of our classes, Awareness Through Movement.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really pay much attention to this little preposition in the middle, through. It's not really about movement.
Right.
It's about awareness. Movement is the vehicle. Movement is the area of exploration. This is where we circulate in this area of movement in order to grow, to transform ourselves, to live better, and including to have more emotional intelligence.
Right. So
And I hope we'll come later to how this works on all levels of life, how emotions are part of the process of growth that we are trying to create in ourselves and in our clients.
So a couple of things came up for me when you said that. And one of them, which is so important, this idea of awareness through movement, that we don't teach awareness of movement, that the movement is a vehicle towards developing our emotional intelligence as well as other aspects of our intelligence. And this whole idea of how we work with the brain. And then the other thing that came up as both of you were talking, I was reminded of the talk that Alan Questel gave, which is called Liking Yourself More. And remembering that, Moshe Feldenkrais talked about that we always have four things going on, right? Moving, thinking, sensing, and feeling.
Mhm.
So that brings us back to what you were saying, Tiffany, about how you felt, that you maybe liked yourself more. So, and then you just mentioned transformation, Michael. So then that brings me the question of, is is our aim to fix people, to be better people? When you say transformation and when we say liking ourselves more, there's this implication that we have a goal to make people better. Can you, either one of you, speak to that? Because I think that that confuses people sometimes.
Yeah, the transformation is not really something that sells very well. People don't usually come to you to be transformed. So they come when they have a problem and they want you to help them solve it, if not solve it for them. This idea that we can fix people is a total fiction, and we are not therapists. This is clear, at least clear for me. I'm not in the business of fixing people. I'm a teacher. And in teaching, and the particularity of Feldenkrais, which I really love, is that it hardly has any dogma. I don't teach something that I know and the other person doesn't. My only job is to create conditions in which the other person can grow. So, and this is, again, we are talking about the whole person. And I think Feldenkrais was very much aware that he was working with the whole person, with everything. Movement was his vehicle, and it was it is so accessible, as Jeff Haller says in his talk. It is palpable. It is the area where you can make small changes, you can see them, you can even measure them. They're easy. It's easy to make changes, small changes in movement, because we have our proprioception, we have the feeling of our body, we know what we're doing, and we use all the tools to create learning space by slowing down, making it softer, making it easy. So we have time and the possibility to awaken awareness. And with this, we create growth. And we help people also get rid of their pains as a byproduct. Only they come to us, they don't know this. They want to get rid of their pain, of course. So transformation is something that it is like our eagle's view of what we are doing. I think
Right.
the way I perceive it.
And transformation isn't always for the better. It depends on your perspective, right? So it's an interesting word, the word transformation. Well, before I jump in, Tiffany, do you want to add to that?
I guess I was thinking, this thing about fixing versus not fixing. I think it's very strong in our work that we're not fixing, and also not even pathologizing. And I think that that's one of the things that's so beautiful. And I keep going back to that first lesson, but I remember the practitioner saying, "And what position do you sleep in?" And I remember thinking, oh, there's a right answer to that. And I said, all positions, is that okay? Thinking that sometimes people say sleep on your back. And she just was like, there was this neutrality to her response, which was just like curiosity. And so I think that shift from kind of like a judgmental assessment, like corrective thing, I've felt that from the beginning. And that's the thing that's really kept me in this work, is that it's a constant learning process. And what you said, Michael, about the environment for learning, that's creating the conditions for the person to shift on their own, that we're not like making someone change, but that through being joined, being connected with, being in a safe, non-judgmental environment for exploration and play, then just like little children, when they have that kind of safe, supportive environment, then you don't have to do so much, and not that you don't have to do much. I'm a mom, I know that, but in terms of like directive, it's like more about creating the conditions, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that interested me in, going over these different videos, and I'm sure that you can add to it, is when I think of emotional intelligence, it brings me to this idea of being able to respond and have choices instead of reacting. And I know Jeff spoke about it a lot in his video, but maybe you want to, could you talk about, because it's like people rarely come, as Michael said, people rarely come to see us because they're depressed or because they have fear. Sometimes they do, but for the most part, they come because something hurts or they want to fix their posture, and then the emotional component unfolds because of that. But this ability to be able to receive what's happening and respond in a more intelligent way, how does Feldenkrais help us do that? Because I think that people would be really curious. How can that help us?
Well, first, I just want to say, as I've gotten more into moving in the direction of including emotional well-being as like a central part of my work, more people are coming to me with that in the foreground, which has been wonderful. So, but definitely before that, it was more like coming for pain. And so just wanting to say that I think depending on kind of the space that we're occupying, maybe that brings in different people are interested in different
Absolutely.
things.
Hmm.
Yeah. In terms of the choice thing, do you want to jump on that, Michael? Or
Yeah, I I've been thinking about this a lot recently. So I think what we're doing in creating the conditions for growth and for change to happen is we're opening a gap between the stimulus and the response.
Hmm.
We look like under the microscope at what is happening in my body when I almost start to do a movement. And I open this gap between actually doing it and going for for an objective, and examine this beginning, this impulse. And this little gap is made of awareness. It's just
Hmm.
a space that we normally don't have, because when we in our daily life, we have to perform, we have to do things, we go for something the whole time, and we just don't take the time, we don't have the time, so this gap doesn't exist. We have the intention and the action at the same time.
Hmm.
So opening this gap is the introducing awareness into what I'm doing, and as Feldenkrais said it beautifully, know what you're doing in order to do what you want. And it dawned at me that it is exactly the same of what you do in therapy. When you look into your emotions, you open a gap, you observe what happens in your body, how the emotion builds up, and you're in a safe situation, in a kind of a parenthesis in your daily life where you can stop and look. And it's exactly the same as what we do in meditation. When you observe your thoughts, you open a gap. So it in all of these areas, and it happens, these are just areas of observation. We can observe the thoughts, we can observe the emotions, we can observe the stories that we are telling ourselves, or we can observe movement, and we open this gap of awareness. And this is where we become more dignified, because we have choice. We become free persons. So we are doing it through movement because this is our area of expertise, but the gap is the same one, and the change is the same. It's global. When you become aware, as Alan said in his talk, awareness is irreversible. You start noticing, and you cannot unnotice what you notice. You start, awareness is a practice.
Mhm.
And we learn it. We learn it. This is why people keep coming. You don't learn it in one class. You take another class and another class. And the beautiful thing in our modality is that classes are always different. It's never boring. You don't do the same. So you observe, you practice the same thing in a million different ways. And in this space that we're opening, that is called awareness, we can grow and become free, freer.
Yeah, and I think like some concrete things are coming to mind. Actually, I think it's a really great question, Lavinia, that I'm like, I would love to just create a whole brainstorm of all the different ways that we create or support this emergence of choice in the method, because there's so many different strategies, like what you just said, Michael, about in the many different ways, or the fact that there's novelty, like through novelty, we create choices. Through doing the same thing in 3 different ways, 4 different ways, the same movement in different ways, or taking the same movement and bringing it into a different orientation and another different orientation. And then the other thing I was thinking about is how the permission, the permission to rest, or the permission to not listen to the teacher. I mean, I think that to honor to be kind to ourselves, to refer to Alan's talk about, this, like, are you moving in a way that feels good to you? Like having these questions being asked in terms of the classes, but then also with the touch, having someone touch me in a way that is without a sense of judgment or evaluation. Like that gives me a different choice to be with myself, to feel like, wow, I can just be not conflicted. Like I'm remembering one lesson where someone was pushing through my leg and I had the words go through my head, I agree. It's just like this agreement, this joining with the person, so that then they can learn how to do that for themselves, so that I can, that what you just said, if you know what you do, you can do what you want, but most of the time we don't know what we're doing. So I think that awareness comes in, and then the options to like, I'm going to leave this dance class now because I'm done, or I'm not going to listen to the person tell me to do this thing. I'm going to find my own way because I know that it's possible, because I've had these environments support me to listen to myself. That creates options. But I think there's a lot more, and
There's so much, and you were referring to what Alan was saying. Both of you in your notes to me talked about this statement of his is do I like the way I'm feeling when I do this movement? And I can't ask myself that question if I haven't created this parentheses that Michael's talking about. If I don't have the space to even ask myself a question about how I feel in the moment, then I never actually, and to me, when I say am I doing this in a way that I like, it brings me a question about judgment or non-judgment. And that when we create, as you put it, the conditions for novelty and curiosity and exploration and the permission, then that gives a person permission to not have to move in their compulsive way. And compulsion, I think, is a huge part of why we feel emotionally compressed or reactive, because we're doing things that we think we're supposed to do, or that we should do, or that we've been conditioned to do. And, of course, Moshe's book, The Potent Self, was all about spontaneity and how we can free ourselves from compulsion. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of these terms, that we've got. We've got novelty, we've got curiosity, we've got freedom from compulsion. Anybody want to jump in? Because to me, they're all related to how I can continue to develop my emotional intelligence.
I can jump in on compulsion, or maybe rephrase your question for my own sake. Compulsion sounds like something negative. Obviously, it is something that it's some negative thing that you do and without a choice. I would make it a little bit more neutral and talk about habits or habitual patterns. We are full of them. A huge part of the day, we do things automatically. We do things that are trained and that they're just whole systems in the nervous system that light up all at once. And we have this with our emotions, our emotional reactions to things that happen around us, that we find ourselves reacting the same way again and again. And it happens in movement. Of course, we know how to look for it, and we know how to identify these habitual patterns that people usually don't even think about, because they're totally automatic. Like, how do I hold myself? How do I deal with balance, with gravity? When we are upright, which is the very human position, we play with balance the whole time. Our brain is constantly busy maintaining balance. If not, we'll fall down very quickly. So this is a habitual pattern, and we need them. We need habits. We cannot invent the wheel the whole time with everything we do. It is really necessary to have automatic patterns that work in the background, because it allows me to focus on something in the present that I need to focus on, and not on just living. And here I come again to the gap that we open when we can stop. Both Jeff Haller and Alan Questel talk about this in different ways. Like, in order to awaken awareness, you need to stop and look before you go on, because then automatic pilot goes in and you just do the thing that you know how to do. So when you stop, you can look and see what happens, and you can introduce changes. So we don't want to automatize our habits. We really need them. What we can do is like a computer programmer. We go into this program, it works okay, we can live with it, but it can work better. And there's always room for improvement. So we stop, we fiddle around with the little details, and we send it again to the automatic pilot. I still don't have to think about maintaining my balance, but I do it better after a class. And it's the same with emotions, it's the same with thoughts. And Jeff was talking about this Zen space of not here and not there. This is the gap that I'm talking about. It's being in this space where you have choice. And then you can choose, do I do my automatic thing? Do I do my habitual thing? Or I can try something new.
So you, do you want to say anything to that, Tiffany? Because he brought up more questions for me, but.
No, I'm just looping back around to your question that involved curiosity. What's coming to mind for me around that is just pleasure, the importance of pleasure in learning, in expanding our capacity for choice. And this in terms of like habits and compulsions, like I think that, you know, we tend to really focus on the problem or focus on the difficulty, and that this attending to pleasure and that really growing, like the nuances of pleasure, how that can really grow if we bring our curiosity to that, expand our options in other ways. That's just what I wanted to add.
Well, and it relates to what I wanted to continue with, because Michael brought up balance. And, you know, we think about balance, it's not just physical, right? We want to be mentally balanced. We want to be emotionally balanced. And, you know, one of the ways we don't sit around and analyze somebody to try to figure out how to become emotionally balanced. We literally work with the skeleton, right? And so Jeff spoke about that in his talk, but I wondered if anyone wants to go further with this idea of using the skeleton as a support for my emotional balance. And when you said pleasure, that was the first thing I thought of. I went back to your walking in beauty talk, you know.
Mhm.
It wasn't like somebody told you you were beautiful. It wasn't like somebody suddenly fixed your self-image, but you yourself had a different relationship to your skeleton. And
Mhm.
so how does that happen?
I mean, I think also that the that the skeleton brings us in where there's this direct relationship between the skeleton and gravity and being in the environment. And I think that when, like how I was before I came to this work, which is like from the head up and the wrists down, maybe feet, maybe a belly, that my attention and my experience of life was much more in my head or in my thoughts and my feelings, but not differentiated, just like a big mush of like emotional thought mixture. And that bringing in the skeleton and actually having a skeleton that can move in relationship to the environment and then have actually an orientation to the environment that before my orientation was more inward and like more disoriented in this kind of like childhood blah blah blah. So having a skeleton that can move, and you know that whole idea of, well, maybe you don't know the idea of acture, which is Feldenkrais's, he coined the term acture, which is his word for posture, the ability to move in any direction without hesitation. So that is related to the movement of the skeleton in gravity, but it's also the movement of our emotions, the movement, you know, and Odette spoke to this too, about like this being able to be in a place in your experience where at any you want to move forward with your intention, and you can, your emotions are available to come and to go as you're moving in this direction. And that reversibility of emotional reversibility is connected to our skeletal, you know, reversibility. Yeah.
Yeah, but the feeling of actually knowing how I hang off my skeleton, right? So much of our emotional baggage is connected to tension and what
Mhm.
Feldenkrais called anxiety patterns.
Yeah.
And not, you know, I don't know, Michael, do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, you mentioned Odette's talk. She had all of these models and visuals in her presentations, and the one that stuck with me was exactly this. There was this circle of emotions where she placed the emotions around a middle point, and in the center there was neutral or neutrality. I don't remember what she called it, but like a neutral state, no particular emotion.
Right.
And this is exactly what Feldenkrais describes as a posture. Well, one of his definitions is a place where you can move in all directions without preparations and with the same ease. This is the neutral, and it's really the same one. It is not just um, similar, but in another area. The emotional balance is a physical thing. Emotions are physical, and this has been studied a lot recently. The the different, each emotion has its pattern of heartbeat, of breath, of posture, of muscle tone. Emotions are physical. So when we work with the body and we work with movement and we change muscle tone, when we change position and how you and where your center is, we change the emotional state, and people come up from a lesson and they feel it. And I think it is our duty, and we do this maybe too little. I'm talking about myself. Help our clients, our students, to make the connections. Because sometimes there is this myth that in FI, in the individual session, you don't talk, you just touch. Feldenkrais did it this way. He talked very little when he was working hands-on. But we are not Feldenkrais, and at least for me, I find with the years that I need to talk to my client, and it is really helpful if I verbalize and help them verbalize what is happening, what relevance this little change that happened in class has to their life, to their emotions, to their relationships, to their work, how it is connected, because it is. But if we imagine that they will just go out and apply it to everything in their lives, it doesn't really happen. It didn't happen to me. I had to go in different paths and search in different ways and do lots of personal growth examinations to really connect all the dots. So yeah, it's part of our damnation of being seen as a body work. Like we have the duty to make the connection, to make it global. We are dealing with the whole person, and it has a lot to do with emotions and emotional health. We want our clients to be emotionally healthy, not just to feel better in their body and get rid of back pain.
Although much back pain is related to emotions, isn't it?
Of
And
course.
that's, you know, and this whole idea, I mean, of people beginning to recognize that, yes, emotions are in your body. You know, so many times I go, well, where do you think the emotion is? Where did it come from? It didn't come from outer space. It's in your body. It's nowhere else. But to be able to actually feel the change in one's emotional state between the way you were when you came in and the way you are as you're leaving is what you're speaking about here. I did want to say, we do have a few questions, but just to go back to what you were saying about talking during a session versus Moshe talking during a session, I've seen some videos where he did talk. And
Yeah.
we want to remember that awareness through movement is a huge component of our work. And it's all talking. We talk through the entire session. So when we're working with people one-on-one, it's up to us how we choose to use both our hands and our words in order to connect with someone, in order to establish rapport with someone. And in fact, I remember in last year's summit when I think his name is Robert Schleip was talking about the fascia, and that when you're working in functional integration with someone, that the tone and the pitch of your voice impacts your fascia. So if a Feldenkrais practitioner is using their whole self in order to help someone else find grounding and choice, then the voice is a valid part of that lesson. I mean, obviously, if you're just telling jokes and chit-chatting about the news, then you lose something. But if there's an intentionality, and that's where Feldenkrais was a master, right? Because he would direct people into a conversation, and then suddenly they realized that their shoulder was moving differently. So it's a way of directing and redirecting somebody's attention. And that affects our emotional quality as well. So maybe we can start with some of the questions.
I
And
have this
maybe,
one quote
good.
that I just keep
Sure.
like, is this the moment? Is this the moment? And before we get into
All right,
it,
this is the moment.
this is the moment. Okay, it's from Odette. I loved her diagrams and circles and triangles and all that. And she said, emotions figure as the basis of our somatic connection between inside and outside of ourselves, similar to the organic function of our skin, to protect the integrity of our closed ecosystem, but also to maintain contact with the outer ecosystem, our environment.
Right. And Jeff spoke about skin also.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
So, you know, the skin
Mhm.
is where we have our proprioceptive experience, but then we bring in our interoceptive experience as well, the two kind of. So I guess my question always is my skin a boundary, or is it a meeting place? Ken Wilber talked about that, right? Am I a boundary, or am I like the water coming onto the shore? You know, and can I meet the world through, and people feel that sometimes they feel softer, more permeable, when they finish with a Feldenkrais lesson? What's that about? And it's got to have something to do with less tension, maybe. What do you think?
Definitely less tension.
So yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking that she was talking about it not so much as like the physical skin, but just as a metaphor. And to me, I've just been sitting with that today, or moving with that today, and that I really like that image of the. And she also talks about the cell, like we are an enclosed cell, our own selves that are separate, but then cells need each other also. And I think that that's a bit of how we work in Feldenkrais too, is like we're joining another person's system. Someone said more hydration. Yeah. Um, we're joining a person's system in functional integration. And so, the quality of my own softness, my own whatever it is that is happening in me gets transmitted to the person through touch and through voice and through presence. And I think that is part of, who somebody else was saying, that Jeff was saying about co-creating, that the environment is creating you and you're creating the environment, and it's continuous. There's a loop, so that as
right.
we change, we're going to shift our environment. And if we don't, then the environment will keep will keep us the same. So we have to, there's a Feldenkrais quote, there's a continuous commerce between the growing organism and its changing environment. It's like we're all interconnected in that way. And so I think that that's one way that our emotional well-being shifts also. Yeah.
Right.
Can I
So
say
I'm going to, oh, go
quickly
ahead, Michael, go ahead.
before you go to the questions? It just came up, so I really want to mention it. Also, something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. We work in our work is very much looking inside. When we do individual work, we help the person go inside and really observe what is happening in very minute details of movement. When we do a class, there may be many people on the floor, but each one goes inside to observe, to explore, to look at what is happening in their patterns, their ways of movement. And then what we expect is the person goes out to the world, to action, to go live a life. And part of the important part of emotional health would be our relationships. And this is something that comes up very strongly now when we've been confined. I've been at home like for the last 6 years. I went shopping 2 days, I think. And I am more connected than ever before. There's something happening. And I think it is the Feldenkrais world and our work, at least in my thinking, is evolving to include that. And also to make it conscious, to think about it, to talk about it. I get up from looking inside in order to open up to the world. I don't want to live encapsulated in my awareness of myself.
Right.
So, and there's community thing happening very strong, and this summit is a proof. There are thousands of people here with us, and I don't know, I think something is happening in the Feldenkrais world as well as hopefully in the whole world.
I know, just kind of, I mean, you can call it a silver lining, the timing of having a summit when COVID hit, right? So we have no place else to be. So we're going to learn and grow and find a community online, which I just think is fantastic. Well,
Now, for the most part, there is that internal thing happening, but there are many lessons that are about also orienting to the environment. And also, I'm remembering a lesson that this woman, Gabri Yaron, gave to this person who was sitting in a chair and who was really like, just her intention was here. And the whole point of the lesson was to bring the person out into the environment. And that I feel like is a really big part of our work, but it sometimes gets, over in the corner. And so I do think it is in there. And I think that you're right that it's coming more forward now, maybe.
Well, one thing for sure, in Feldenkrais work, we're taking the time to be more introspective, go inward, and pay attention to ourselves. And we're taking that time to
Mhm.
do that. And so now everyone has that time to do that. And so it's a great opportunity for everyone to kind of step back and go, well, what are my habits? How do I live? What do I want from my life? So in a way, it's like this is the moment. This is the moment for Feldenkrais to come to the fore for people.
Hmm.
So I'm going to start with a question that is not emotional, but I think it's relevant for the people who are listening. And I'm sure you can answer this easily. Odette's unique lessons on a chair were mind-blowing. Is this a technique taught when becoming a practitioner? Or is this her own interpretation and implementation lesson? I'm thinking of so many clients who find it so difficult or almost impossible to lie on the floor. So, that's just a very practical question, but an important one for people who are new to this work.
We have many chair lessons, many sitting lessons. Yeah. Once you start digging into the Feldenkrais method, there's less. That's one thing that's really cool about Feldenkrais is that there are lessons, there's thousands of different lessons in so many positions and configurations. You would be like, I can't even believe, my legs are like this. And but there are also a lot of those lessons can be adapted. There are a lot of lessons that can be adapted to chairs. There are sitting lessons, standing lessons. Yeah.
Do you want to add anything to that, Michael?
I found myself in the last weeks, I'm doing online classes. This is not my habitual way of teaching. And I found myself doing so far, it's going to change next week, so far only chair lessons because I like this way of seeing the people and having them see me. And there is some sense of community that you don't get when people are lying in front of their camera. So yeah, the working on a chair is a huge, there is so much to explore there, and we spend so much of our time in chairs, and yes, it's part of our technique. We learn it, we do it in our training, and this is part of what we are teaching.
The thing that I liked about how Odette was teaching those lessons, though, that I thought was unique or that just stood out to me was that the way she was teaching it was like, and you may feel this, and you may feel that you're shifting your weight forward. So it was like this invitation that was this gentle, it wasn't like, now do this. And I really liked that a lot, actually. Yeah.
So I find this question interesting because of the way it's worded and because of I want a real Feldenkrais answer to this. It's numbered. Number 1. It seems to me emotional balance takes a long time to acquire. And also, number 2, how do I get free from positional vertigo that comes and goes? And I think there's a kernel of an answer in there in terms of how we do our work.
Yeah, what we would do with a person who comes with these two questions is this.
Right, because balance is balance, right? Emotional balance and physical balance.
Yeah. So about the long time, I always tell my students, this is a process, this is a practice. You improve something in every class. If you go to one class, it is probable that your life won't change that much. If you keep doing it, it will. And it's any practice. If you practice it, it works. If you don't, not so much. So this is and it's good to remember. I did an Alexander and a Feldenkrais lesson from his recordings. I have the privilege of doing the original classes in Hebrew. And he was saying there never comes a point where a movement has reached ideal and you cannot improve it anymore. There is always room for improvement. So long time, yeah, all your life probably, to get healthier emotionally as long as you live. This would be my idea of how time applies to our work.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Then I would work with balance and see what happens and how it is connected.
Yeah, what comes to mind is this idea of successive approximations. And so that, you know, you make a little change or you do one lesson and you have some piece that comes in. It's not really good for us to change too fast. It would be destabilizing to all of a sudden, if you're, you know, this way, to be like a whole another person. So we need to, you know, change in small increments so that we're kind of mostly the same, but adding a little change. And then the other thing that comes to mind is there's this thing Feldenkrais once said, that doing a Feldenkrais lesson once a week is like pissing in the ocean, because our habits are so strong, you know, and it's like it's an ocean. So I think, you know, doing it more than once a week is a good idea, and that's part of why I moved stuff online too, and like how to support people more than just one hands-on lesson a week, but to create a way for people to have a daily practice or several times a week. I think that you know, having these little doses and what's the right dose, that's also a question. You know, what's the right dose for your learning, and this whole thing of the vertigo coming and going, I think to pay attention to when it comes and when it goes, and be in the process, and that over time those little bits, they do add up to like bigger change, but it can't just be too dramatic, or then you would get dizzy, right? It would be too, yeah.
And people sometimes do get up from a lesson and feel disoriented and need time to reorganize. But also sometimes in one lesson, a person can experience a sense of being more balanced emotionally, mentally, and physically, so that I see that the possibility, yes, the habits come back, the patterning comes back because it's so strong in us, but I can become emotionally balanced in one moment or in one session and feel the possibility for going further and wanting to learn more. That's one of the things that I, you know, otherwise people wouldn't come back, right? If they never felt any change, they wouldn't come back. But we feel a change, and then it's like, oh, that's possible. I could be more of myself, or as Alan Questel said, I could like myself more. Just like what you experienced in your first experience, right? That moment of liking, feeling more physically and or emotionally balanced. The causes of benign positional vertigo are myriad. So to find my own inner balance is a
You're cutting out, chopping up a little bit. I'm not sure if your mic is like losing battery or something.
No, I think is it better now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
got animated.
I thought of one other experience I had, you know, in terms of these small changes. So like if somebody has a real strong asymmetry like this, and then at the end of the lesson, they were like this, that might be too much of a change. But going from this to this, they might feel fabulous, like a little shift that you can actually feel and integrate. And I once had a lesson with a Feldenkrais trainer, Dennis Leary, he's passed now, but had a lot of experience and amazing practitioner. And after the lesson, I did not feel any physical changes. I had had lessons with him before. And I walked around and I was like, okay, I know, I was aware that I was not aware of a physical change. I went on with my day and was just curious. I went into the job that I had at the time, which was the last job that I have had, was teaching kids with learning disabilities. I sat down with my clipboard and a pen to take the notes. And the moment that I picked up the pen, I was sitting in front of the kid, the moment that I picked up the pen to start taking notes, I knew it was just like, the change was subtle enough that I actually didn't notice it until I went back into the familiar environment. And then it was clear to me that this environment was not going to work anymore with this change that I had.
So you went on to another dream.
Yeah. That was my last like part-time job. Yeah, that I kept.
Is it better to experience the Feldenkrais method one-on-one with an instructor, or is a group class also beneficial?
They're both beneficial. Yeah. I think whatever you can do, try both, see what you like. Some people, it's like some people like to come in one door or just happen to come in one door. Some people prefer one or the other. They're really, I mean, I find that my individual clients get more out of their sessions if they do ATM, awareness through movement, the classes or the recordings, and vice versa, and some people, I had clients for a long time who like, I don't want to be aware. I just want to be moved, that I don't really like working with people like that anymore, but I did. And then also some people really prefer the moving themselves and not to be touched and to moved by someone else. So I think there's like a whole range, and just try both and see.
Do you have anything to add to that, Michael?
Classes are definitely very effective. That was the
Right.
question.
And I think to me, the brilliance of these two ways of approaching awareness is that we all have different learning styles. We all have, some people are auditory learners. Some people can't listen to words and need to be directed through touch or sensation. I have students that feel uncomfortable in a crowd. And then I have students who feel uncomfortable being touched. And so this work gives the opportunity for learning in all these different directions without creating limitations or constraints. We find our constraints on our own. We don't need to add any more constraints. So yeah, I agree. They're all absolutely beneficial. So this is an interesting question. We could probably spend the whole rest of the time on it. And so it'll be interesting to see how we can answer it concisely. Which are the common points or concepts between Feldenkrais and Oriental body practices like Qigong, yoga, etc.?
Interesting.
Not the differences, the common points. That's the part I find really interesting.
Yeah, probably the common point is a concept we've been talking about a lot: awareness. It's these Eastern arts all have the same clarity, that they are working with a whole person, that it is not about movement. Movement is a vehicle you need and you use in a conscious way, your awareness, your ability to focus, and it's a practice. It gets better with time. So this is definitely a common point. Movement is the area of exploration.
Right, they're all movement. So that's another common point.
Yeah.
You want to add anything to that, Tiffany?
No, I don't have so much. I mean, I have little dips of experience with those, but I don't feel like I could say exactly.
Can you talk about the ambience that is needed in a group class? Is there a connection with the way this can influence awareness and discovery?
I'm curious if the person who wrote that could say a little bit more about what they mean by ambience, but I mean, I think the things that come to mind are like non-judgmental, compassionate, caring, respectful environment. That's what comes to mind.
So we need that in order to create. I mean, I was wondering whether it was relating to what Michael was talking about, creating an environment for learning, conditions for learning.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't thinking about soft music and lighting, but maybe that person was thinking about that also. Do you want to add anything to that, Michael?
Yeah, this is what came up to me immediately. We are very careful in creating conditions for learning and ambience. I mean, here in Chile, for example, there is hardly any central heating. So this is a point that is for me crucial. When I teach a class, I have to find out if the place is warm enough. It can be freezing. So this is an ambience that doesn't favor learning. If you have to protect yourself against the cold, um, you're not open to learning. There is some survival mechanism at work. So this is what I'm thinking about: safe space, silence, um, 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 the time to do this parenthesis and look into yourself, and then there are the elements that are also part of our work that Anat Baniel described it so beautifully with her 9 essentials. She's coming later in the summit, no?
Yes.
Make it slow, lower the intensity, all of the elements of how we give instructions and how we touch, how the class is conducted. It's part of creating conditions for learning. Yeah.
I think an important aspect of the ambience is creating a sense of safety.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
because if you feel safe, that you're not going to be criticized, that you're not exposed, then you can learn without fear. So, and by the way, she did pop in and say, no, she wasn't talking about music. She was talking about what you were talking about, Michael. So we were on the same page there. So I don't know if I understood from the interview exactly how Alan's idea of liking yourself more expands on Moshe's original work, such as in The Potent Self. Do you mind speaking to that?
I mean, I think what comes to mind is that I like how he kind of is phrasing it in a way that it's like something you can just kind of like tuck in your pocket, you know, like, am I doing this in a way? I think it's just a way of saying it that to me, that feels like another variation on Moshe's, you know, intention or work. In terms of whether it expands it or whether it is distinct or different, it feels like it's just like an expression. I've done some of his or I think maybe he has like a Facebook group called Like Yourself More or something, and he posts like fun kind of images and, you know, like making it fun and accessible to like yourself, like to kind of claim that that's part of what we're doing, and own that it's good to like yourself, you know, that it's not like I have to like pretend to like myself over here. And then, so that's what comes to mind. I'm not sure if I'm really adding anything to the conversation about it, but.
Well, of course you are. Michael, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, there is some element that is very crucial in our work and that we also emphasize a lot is treat yourself well. This is something that sounds very obvious, but it is totally anti-cultural. Our culture teaches us to hit our head against the wall, to try harder, to work stronger, to kill ourselves, working. So just treat yourself with care, with love, is also something that we need to relearn. children do it. They don't, if something doesn't feel good, they don't do it. And then we learn to do it anyway. So I like this focus that Alan has. There is like reminding ourselves again and again. Do I like what I'm doing? And if not, why am I doing it?
Yeah, it feels very practical. It's like a practical question that you can like really bring into any moment. And yeah, and I think that thread of caring for yourself and a kind of self-love was a thread through all of the interviews. And also I was thinking too about, Alan's emphasis on kindness and like a concrete act of kindness, that the kindness that we experience towards ourselves and in ourselves through awareness through movement or functional integration, that shifts how we are being with ourselves and also shifts how we are being in the world, which then it's like this kindness can extend to other people through us being in more of that self-kind place.
I was thinking as you were talking, when you think about what Feldenkrais said in the book, The Potent Self, how he spoke about the fact that our conditioning and our education and all the different ways that we end up so that we don't feel we have choice, we don't feel we have options, and how then you can't live a full, spontaneous life. I feel like that was his language for that time. And in some ways, I feel like Alan's statement of, liking myself more, as well as do I like the way I feel when I'm doing this movement, is putting it in a language that is more from our time without, I don't want to say it's simplifying it, but it's actually being very direct. It's like, do I like how I feel? And if I don't like how I feel, how can I begin to use awareness to bring myself to a place I do like? And to me, that's just another rephrase. It's maybe not an expansion, but a rephrasing of what Moshe was saying. Did you want to say something more to that, Michael?
Yeah, there's something general that comes up for me. There is also for me the beauty of our method. I'm pretty sure that Feldenkrais didn't expect his students to do what he does, to do Feldenkrais his way. And and he was very clear about it. He was sending his students, go do your thing, be yourself. So Alan's version is his version. It is very personal. It is his understanding. He has his own focus, and each of us has it is unique. I would never do Feldenkrais the way Feldenkrais did his work, but I don't think he could do it my way. He's not me. He wasn't. So there is something unique, and I can like Alan's focus, like he has his own spotlight on Feldenkrais teachings, and I have my own, and I could phrase it a little different and put the focus in different parts. And so I will attract the people who are attracted to me and not to Alan or to Feldenkrais. So, and this is really embedded in the method. Right. It allows us to be more of ourselves, or to have more emotional dignity, if you will.
Right. You're absolutely right. We, just like Tiffany was saying earlier, that because she's gotten involved in working more with the emotions, she's attracting more people who are interested in the emotions. And I found the same thing happening for me, because I was interested in people who want to learn more about themselves. I began to attract the people, that were less interested in fixing and more interested in growing. And of course, in the process, they improve. Right. So we attract what we want. Okay, here's a big one for you all. What is awareness? a mental construct, emotional, spiritual? What is the place of sensation in all of this?
I can tell you,
I feel like there's a there's like few questions in there, but go ahead, Michael, if you had.
no, you go ahead.
No, you do it. No, you do it.
No, I mean, I think, there's Feldenkrais has like long talks about like what is awareness. And I mean, to me, what's like, and I'm thinking about Odette's circles and triangles and like these different ways. I just feel like there's so many different ways of looking at it and lenses that we can go through and look through, and it can depend. I don't think that there's one right. I don't claim to say like what the right thing is for that, but in terms of sensations, that was the second part of the question. There Lavinia was talking about this moving, sensing, feeling, thinking, that sensations are a part of the whole of ourselves. And so we can develop our awareness through our sensations. We can develop our sensations through our awareness. They're symbiotic, or they're like this. But you can have awareness of other things without sensation. So I think I'm passing the baton on now.
Michael, you've done many different metaphysical studies.
Well, I don't know if I can come up with a definition, but I'm thinking about all of the new neuroscience that comes up in the last decades that Feldenkrais didn't have it, and all of the new discoveries of how our brain works confirms and corroborates his thinking. And I would say from this point of view, awareness is activating our frontal lobe, the part more, the newer part, the human part of our brain. We are looking at, we have deeper parts that are in charge of our habits. What we've been talking about before, we have automatic patterns. They are built into deeper parts of our brain. When we do this human thing, this ability that we have to focus our attention on what we're doing and creating choice, meaning that we are not enslaved by our habitual patterns, we can follow them or not. So awareness would be this, the ability to focus our attention on something, anything. When we are talking about awareness through movement, we're focusing on movement. So yeah, probably as like spiritually, it is the very human ability to be free, to create freedom. So
when I think of
in the practices, look at how I work, what makes me tick, and choose. Do I go for that, or do I do something new?
when I think of awareness myself, there's a quality of attention that is that is inclusive, that I'm aware of the outside, and at the same time there's an awareness of myself, an existence of myself. And I think, somebody put in the chat that sensation is the tentacle, our sensations are the tentacles of awareness. So if I look at the quality, for example, right now, it's not, I can have a sensation in the sense that I knock my knuckles on the table and there's a sensation of pressure, and I can decide through my perception whether it's pleasant or painful. But can I have a sensation, a more global sensation of myself in this space, in this place? And I don't know if that's mental. My mind has to be part of it. My mind can't wander, because if my mind wanders, then I'm no longer with my sensation, right? And at the same time, I'm inward and aware of whether there's an emotion taking place, going back to Odette's circles and this feeling of being centered in my neutrality is when I can begin to actually experience what one could call a global sensation. Russell Delman often spoke in our trainings about expanding your field of attention. So then it can't just be coming from my mind, right? There has to be something that I'm experiencing globally in myself that I call awareness. When I'm reaching, I'm not just thinking of my hand, right? I'm sensing the quality of movement, the sensation of extension of the hand, the touch of my arm on the floor, as well as maybe an emotion of going, I'll never be able to get there, right? All of that is included in awareness. Am I making this up? Um, are you with me?
Mhm.
But
Makes sense.
but it's almost as if you can't even speak about it unless you're actually trying to do it, unless you're really trying to feel that. So to me, Moshe Feldenkrais once talked about, and I don't remember, I think it was in the Amherst training, he said that we're so used to feeling lousy. I'm paraphrasing terribly, that when we feel a little bit more organized or more functional, we think we are having a spiritual experience. Do you remember that quote? I remember he was just making fun of it because he was talking about all these people and gurus and all this kind of stuff. And the truth is, we're so used to being messed up that when we feel more functional, we feel like we're having a spiritual experience, because we're not used to feeling that good, which goes back to the liking yourself thing. And somebody put in a quote here: what is important is that you get the person to love himself, not just like himself. And that was Moshe in 1977, right? In the San Francisco training. So important, that line. And so, of course, again, it's language. What does it mean to love yourself? What does it mean to like yourself more? It's semantics in a way, but I think that we're all saying the same thing. Anyway, I
One thought,
didn't.
yeah,
Go
one
ahead.
thought I had was this idea of like qualities of awareness or dimensions of awareness. And just like you could improve a movement and you can keep improving it and keep improving it, you can continue to improve your awareness and have different experiences, like awareness that is like an awareness of your thinking or an awareness of your emotion. Like, I think that that's the thing that has shifted for me, is that my thoughts and my feelings and my sensations were all mushed together. And so to be able to also differentiate, and this is where like the organic intelligence stuff that I've been getting into has been really helpful, is like sometimes to actually feel the difference between a feeling or a sensation or a thought, or really orienting to my environment. And that when you can have these different dimensions and qualities to your awareness that can be more and more inclusive or get differentiated, or both.
Do you want to add anything, Michael?
Yeah, I think awareness is a practice.
Yeah,
This
practice.
focus, this ability to perceive, to perceive in a finer and finer way, more details, is something that we practice. You were talking about awareness of your thoughts, and yeah, we know that we can move without awareness, still do things. As Feldenkrais said, most of the time, the fact that you that you do something doesn't mean that you know what you're doing. And it's the same with thought. I remembered when you said this, I remembered my first workshop in Shambhala Center, Buddhist meditation. I went to do this weekend workshop. This was like a meditation instruction and some talking, some basic Buddhist teachings, and meditating for quite a few hours a day for a weekend, 2 days. And I ended up I went out Sunday evening hating myself and being so angry with myself. I couldn't believe the amount of bullshit that was going through my head at all time, constantly. This was amazing. It was probably the first time that in my life that I was really aware of my thoughts. Of course, I've been thinking my whole life, didn't have any awareness of this. When I started looking and doing this thing of focusing my attention on my thoughts, I was overwhelmed by the magnitude, the amount of it, the repetition, the uselessness. Yeah, it was a big experience. So this is where we can live without awareness. This awareness is really something that you need to decide to do and take the time to do, which is what we are doing in class.
So Jeff Haller jumped on with not a question. If you count how many lights that are in your room, what are you counting? Not the lights. You are counting your own movements, your eye movements. When you know that you are attending to your own experience, you are entering the realm of awareness. So, and it's interesting, somebody did put in a question here. I feel like we kind of addressed it, but I'm going to ask the question and tell me if you think there's more to it. Is there a connection between Feldenkrais and mindfulness? There's a connection, but is there a difference?
I think the difference is in what we are looking at, in the material. In Feldenkrais, we are mindful of our movement. This is the field of exploration. When you meditate, the mindfulness is, for me, it is part of Buddhist thinking of how the mind works. But it became this thing as a meditation practice, which is paying attention or being aware of your thoughts or of your mind. So it is, again, it's the same thing, just changing the focus of what you're looking at.
But I feel that when I'm doing Feldenkrais, not just being mindful of my movements, I'm using my movement to bring my awareness to my thoughts and my sensations and my emotions and my movement. So I feel for myself, the difference between traditional mindfulness practices is that it doesn't always include, I think some practices must, but it doesn't always include sensation and mobility. But there's something different, because in sitting still, when I'm sitting still, there's a different quality of attentiveness to the center of myself. I don't know. I don't want to dig a hole for myself here, but it seems to me that there's something different. And again, it goes back to, ultimately, I think that Buddhism and Zen and all of those practices are based in a kind of spiritual process. And Feldenkrais emphasized that this was just in this realm. And I think that's important for us to make that distinguishing idea.
I'm thinking of this Thich Nhat Hanh excerpt where he's talking about going to the supermarket can be poetry, or just like the way that you live your life can be like an art. So I feel like you can get to that from many, many different routes. And it's like the medium that you feel
Right.
where you like yourself, where you're enjoying yourself, where you want to do that, where you feel moved or you feel curious. And definitely like being in the Feldenkrais method since I was 23, which is 19 years. I was thinking today, like, I would not have the family that I have. Like, I have 2 little kids. I would not be the mom that and all of that is like, there's so much mindfulness that goes on in just how I touch my daughter, how I see my son, all that. I think it's just different routes to how we want to do it. And the other thing that comes to mind too is Feldenkrais somewhere said that the goal is not awareness, the goal is spontaneity. So we have awareness, we're learning, we're aware, we're learning, but then it's not to be like aware of every little movement all the time, but to have that in the background, and you're chipping away at that and you're including that and you're practicing that, and then you can do what you want. Then you can be spontaneous. Yeah.
I think what you said about there being many different roads is really important, because again, what one person calls mindfulness could be awareness, and liking yourself more versus loving yourself. Sometimes it's difficult because each person, the language is so poor sometimes because we're trying to use the same word to speak about so many different things. Well, here's a fun one for you after all that challenge. And that is, why doesn't the Feldenkrais method, as far as I'm aware of, include relaxing music and the use of essential oils for further deepening the experience of going inside the self-awareness?
What comes to mind is this thing about neutrality. I think it's like there is an emphasis on, can we create like a neutral, safe environment where somebody can pay attention to themselves? And I think that to me, it depends though. It's like there's many paths, for somebody that is the path that really helps support you to listen to yourself, then great, and I think that it's just not part of the mixture of how we've concocted our potions,
You want to say something to this, Michael?
Yeah, there's something about relaxation that I keep coming up against in class, because many times people finish a class and feel more relaxed. And I find myself saying again and again, great, but this is not about relaxation. Most people in our culture have their muscle tone higher than it should be, but not everybody. Some people need a kick in the butt, not really relaxation. And the same class would work for them too, because what we're doing, what we're looking is the balance, the optimal tone, muscle tone, mental tone, emotional tone. So if you go for a massage and they put fragrant oils on you and with soft music, this is fantastic because most of us do want and need to relax. But what we're doing in class is something else, and any of these things would be a distraction. We're trying to maintain our awareness on the material of the class, which is movement in our case.
And also to remember that it's a learning experience. You could think of it that you're in a classroom, and so if the material is me and studying me, and then there's music in the background, I become influenced by that music, and also the essential oils. I am influenced by those changes in my environment. And so then I'm attending to myself, not from a neutral place, but from a place that has been influenced by these added elements. And especially, I mean, relaxing music is one thing, but when people use music with rhythm and you're trying to explore a movement and there's a rhythm going, you find yourself wanting to move to that rhythm. If you no longer have your own rhythm, you're moving to the rhythm of that music, or you're experiencing that drum inside of you. So when we remove those things and just create an atmosphere of safety where you can learn on your own, the relaxation is a byproduct of the experience of learning. So I just want to clarify, somebody asked what I meant by Moshe said, we want to stay in this realm. And what I meant to say is that Feldenkrais always emphasized that awareness through movement and functional integration are not a spiritual path, that it's only about becoming more functional in this world. And if one wants to pursue a spiritual path, that's a different path. So when I was saying Buddhism and other traditions come from a spiritual tradition, he was saying that this work was not a spiritual tradition. So that's all I
I mean,
meant by in this realm.
I think that he said that, but then I think he also alluded, like I think that he alluded to it in different ways. I would, I don't know, I wouldn't say it so definitively, because, and just like Michael was saying, or I forget if you were saying it, Lavinia, that we will all find our own way with this work, and he wasn't intending for, he was, I mean, there's this lesson that he teaches in Amherst, that's this prayer lesson,
Prayer
and
lesson. Oh, sure.
and you can't say that that's like completely, that there's nothing, like what is the quality of devotion? That is, that you can't say that that is completely not a spiritual question, although he wouldn't. So I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, I think he emphasized that this wasn't a spiritual path. That didn't mean he wasn't a spiritual man. We know he was very spiritual man. And we have a whole theme in this summit, 3 people and a panel that's going to be speaking about the spirituality and the Feldenkrais method. And that comes all the way back around to what Michael said, that each one of us takes this work and puts it into our own handwriting. And we find the spiritual elements absolutely in our connection to all of this. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying it's not the emphasis. It doesn't come from a spiritual tradition. That certainly he was influenced. Anyway, we've gone on. We've gone on and on. So we should probably wrap it up. Is there anything that you want to say in conclusion? Because I do want to actually, let me mention it now, that Tiffany, you both have something that you're giving away, right? And so if you want to experience more of some of Michael's and Tiffany's ideas, you just need to click on the button at the bottom of this screen and you'll be able to experience their giveaways. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what you have.
Sure. I'm giving away 2 weeks of access to my online library called Movement and Creativity Library that
Wow,
has over
great.
200 Feldenkrais lessons, over 20 different teachers, so you can explore for the last 2 weeks of May. And then there's 3 classes that like live online classes, one with me, one with David Zemach-Burson, who's another speaker in this summit, and Deborah Bose, who's a wonderful Feldenkrais trainer. And they're all kind of on the themes of emotional well-being, the 3 classes. So check those out.
Michael, did you want to say anything?
Yeah. Tiffany, you were talking about pissing in the ocean. I'm exploring something new here. I'm working on a practice that would be easy to do. I know that many people don't get to do Feldenkrais because you really need to build it into your life. And it takes time. And I know many people would like to do it, but it never happens really. So I'm building this daily 3-minute practice that would go over time. It is new. I know it works. I've been looking a lot into habit building and behavioral change. So this is like taking tiny, tiny bits of Feldenkrais work in small portion, and commit to 3 minutes a day, which I think really anybody could do. So this is where I'm going. My page offers a link to inscribe to get information, because will be a beta group, and I hope to launch it in June. And you get access to a 1 3-minute sample class, what it may look like.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people would like that 3-minute miracle, right? We're always looking for that 3-minute miracle. So a lot of people are asking about how to click on links. I'm sure that Arlene is going to answer all of you. And there's so many wonderful other questions. I hope, first of all, a lot of them did delve into the spirituality. So I do hope that some of you will dive into that summit, because I'm sure a lot of your spiritual questions will be answered there. And if your other questions weren't answered, please do go to feldenkrais.com or check out any of the other people's websites, because some of your more general questions could easily be addressed by many of the Feldenkrais practitioners in this country. So I want to thank both of you. This was truly a mentally exciting and spiritually and emotionally exciting conversation. And I wish you both the best of luck, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.